Hey everybody, today we're going to dive into slab building. I'll show you a couple of ways that you can roll slabs while you're at home. We aren't going to get into the slab roller at this time. That'll be a separate video, go check that one out. Here are some of the tools that you're going to find useful today. If you can scrounge up a rolling pin, any rolling pin that you'd use for baking would work for clay. You don't necessarily want them to go back and forth. Sometimes people have little pizza dough rollers that look something like this. This is called a pony roller. It's really useful for small slabs or for rolling coils into slabs. So if you have one of those, it's a really handy tool for clay as well. You may also want to find some long slats of wood. These could be yardsticks, they could be paint stir sticks, anything that is flat and uniform in thickness and is fairly long. The length of this will determine the length of the possible slabs that you can make. But we'll use these under the rolling pin. You'll also want to have some sort of a tool to smooth the clay out after you've made your slab. These plastic ribs work really well. We sell these at the studio. The metal ribs are commonly available as well, and these work pretty well. My preference is this. We have one studio member though that swears by silicone spatulas. So if you can find one where you can take the tip of the spatula off, this can be a good smoothing tool as well. And these are available likely in your kitchen or at a thrift store. When you're making slabs, it's really important that you wedge the clay thoroughly. I've cut off a large section here simply because I have big hands and it's easier for me to do this amount than smaller amounts. I don't want to go much bigger than this or I start to hurt my wrists and shoulders. But this is a good size for me. Your lump of clay may be bigger or smaller depending. The other thing you want to pay attention to when you're wedging, first off, if you've already watched how to wedge in other videos, you could skip ahead. If you're new to wedging, you want to be sure that you're pushing on the clay with both of the palm/heel of each hand. So I'm pushing down and forward, doing a micro compression into the clay while rolling it, and then the real trick is to roll it back just a little bit further than where you started. So down and forward, roll it back a little further than where I started, down and forward, again and again and again. You want to avoid pressing so hard that you create a deep pocket like this, because then when you go to fold it back over, you may be creating an air pocket in there. Having said that, you need to push hard enough that the clay is actually changing shape. If you're just rolling it around on the table, all you're doing is drying the clay out. The purpose of wedging is to align the clay particles so that they're laying face to face, and also to remove any air that may be trapped in the clay. I'm going to do this about 80 times. I'm not going to make you watch that, so I'm going to skip ahead. The other thing I should mention is notice my body position compared to the height of the table. My hips are above the table height, so I'm able to push down and forward and kind of lock my arms into my core and push with my legs actually. My upper body is not doing anything, but my legs are moving, and that allows me to put force into the clay that's not coming from my arms. Wedging should not hurt. Here at the studio we have little risers that people can stand on if they'd like. If you're working at home, I would suggest figuring out what table height is right for you, because it will make all the difference in the world to your studio practice. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead. So initial steps in rolling out a slab, we need to part the clay into appropriate sized chunks. When I'm making slabs, I'm going to try and make them big enough that they take up most of the space on this board. So I'm going to guess here that half of this chunk is going to get me close to that. Set the other half to the side. Set the other half to the side and cover it with plastic. Okay. When you're making slabs, you want to have a clean work surface. Any debris that's on the table will embed itself in your slab. To start with, we're just going to beat the clay into shape. It's important that you flip the slab frequently or it will stick to the table, especially as it gets thin. Now, to start with, we're going to hand throw this slab. So what that looks like is, from a standing position, I'll throw the slab sort of sideways at the table, hoping the back hits first and the front slaps forward. In doing that, the clay will stretch as it goes forward. This technique takes some practice, but I'd like you to notice that I was throwing the clay in different directions. I was flipping it frequently, and the direction that I threw the clay in, the slab grew in that direction. Watch again. This is a quick way to make a slab. It's good for compression because the clay is being stretched and compressed in many different directions. This is unique to this particular kind of slab making. The other kinds that I'll show you don't have that quality. The slab that you get out of this, the more you do it, will be more consistent. Your first ones may be very thick and thin in varying areas. As you pay attention to how you're throwing it and the kind of pressure it's exerting on the clay, you'll be able to control that a little bit. Typically, for me, this results in a pretty good slab, but a slab that has varying thicknesses. So this could be an ideal way of making slabs if you want a looser feel to your pieces. Next, I'd like to show you how to use a rolling pin to make a slab. So we're going to take this same hand-thrown slab and we're going to give it a uniform thickness using the rolling pins. You can use these techniques in conjunction, or you can just simply use a rolling pin from the beginning. Okay, so I'm just going to start out with the rolling pin, just trying to hit the areas that are standing tall from throwing the slab. With the rolling pin as well, notice how the slab grows when you roll over it. It tends to grow in the direction that you're rolling. And then the other thing I can say is it tends to grow in that direction in one pass, and then if you keep going and you notice it's not getting any longer, that likely means that your clay is getting stuck to the table. You have to be particularly cautious of this on the concrete board tables we have. The canvas tables are a little more forgiving for slabs. Notice how I picked the slab up between two open palmed hands, and I tried not to stretch or warp the slab or pinch it too hard in any one area. So for this slab, I'm going to start out with the rolling pin from the very beginning. Some of the drawbacks here, you noticed when I picked that one up, the slab actually tore. My table is getting wet enough and I'm exerting enough pressure with the rolling pin that the slab is starting to stick to the table. This would likely be remedied if I just moved to a dry spot. The other drawback that you could see is that the slab can only be as wide as the rolling pin fitting on these slats. Whereas the other one I was able to make a much larger shaped slab. This isn't necessarily a problem depending on what it is you're trying to create, just something to be aware of. One other thing I'd like to show you is how to store slabs so that you can dry them to a stiffer state or just maintain the moisture without them sticking together. So what we're going to do is prep a board here. I just have a wooden particle board And I'm going to take a sheet of newspaper, lay that sheet on here first, and then I'm going to cut my slab so that it will fit on this board. In this case, I'm going to cut this slab in half. Take the larger of the two and lay it down on the board. Once it's down there, I want to smooth this slab off. So I'm going to smooth it by dragging my tool diagonally across the slab. Once you've got it smoothed off, you'll simply fold one sheet of paper over it and then go ahead and place the next slab, trying to have it overlap the one beneath it entirely. Then you're going to take another smoothing tool and smooth this slab out. It's really beneficial to run this smoothing tool in a variety of directions. It will help with some of the compression that you're after. So what you want to do when you're ready to wrap these up, and you can keep going with this too, but you want to put a layer of newspaper on the very top. So you've got newspaper underneath, slab, newspaper, slab, newspaper, and you can keep going that way. Just make sure you have newspaper on both sides. If you want these slabs to stay wet for a long period of time, start actually with a big sheet of plastic on the board, then do this whole newspaper sandwich thing, and then wrap your plastic back on top. If you want the slabs to become drier so you can do some stiff slab projects, don't put plastic underneath. Do wrap plastic on top and tuck it under. Leave it for about a week and the slabs will be evenly dry. That's in large part due to the newspaper pulling moisture out and drying them evenly. So next video, check out the basic soft slab projects, and then as these slabs get stiffer, I'll do some stiff slab projects as well. All right, happy making.